Do you know what it takes to become a property valuer? Hi, I'm Daniel Caruana from Preston Road, Patterson, Southport, and I've been a property valuer in the valuation industry for the last 17 years. Basically what it takes to become a property valuer, you need to do a property degree. So it's really a business degree with those property subjects. 2 years full-time experience in the industry, and then you sit a professional exam. You submit 3 or 4 property valuation reports, and there's usually 2 or 3 interviewees, and they can ask you anything to do with the property valuation industry or anything about your reports, and at the end of that interview they give you a pass or a fail. I'll take it back to roughly 2006 when I started my property direction really. I was doing a Bachelor of Business in Cairns, and I was getting towards the end of my Bachelor of Business and really struggling for a direction of where I was going. Wasn't doing so well at uni, being young, partying a lot, stuff like that. And I asked my father, what's that guy do over there? What's he do? He seems to have a pretty good life, pretty interesting character, and he said he was a property valuer. So I gave him a phone call, had a bit of a chat, and he was actually looking for an assistant to start in the property valuation industry. And that's really how my property started, into the property sector really. When I was doing my business degree, something that also changed my direction and gave me clarity in life was right towards the end. I found out, my partner and I found out that we were pregnant. I was still only 23 years old. So I really needed to settle down and figure out what I wanted to do in life. And property valuation was something that I was interested in. My parents had owned real estate previously, investment properties, that type of stuff. So I had a bit of history and understanding and felt comfortable around property. So I started with this company in Cairns in 2006 as an assistant property valuer. I was only earning $29,000 a year. So it was kind of a traineeship and I was learning. But at that stage, my wife was working full time, and when we found out she was pregnant, the day she started her new job, she resigned from her old job where she had annual leave and all that type of stuff. And she started a new job with the government as a traineeship, and that day she started her new job, she had morning sickness. So safe to say she didn't continue. Once she completed traineeship, they didn't keep her on. So earning so little, on $29,000 a year as a trainee, I really wanted to stay in the property industry, and it just wasn't enough. So I went to my directors then and asked for more. Obviously, they refused. So there was a job opportunity in Geelong, but I'd never been to Victoria before. I had a young family. I actually started doing a postgraduate diploma of property. So doing my business degree, I had to do 10 or 12 subjects, property subjects like property law, property management, all these type of things, advanced finance. So I did a phone interview for this valuation firm down in Geelong. Safe to say it was successful, so I flew down to Victoria, having never been to Geelong before, to do a face-to-face interview. It's beautiful. I agree to love it. So I drove around Geelong for about 2 hours just before my interview. The interview went well, and 2 weeks later my wife, my now wife, myself and my 6-month-old daughter moved down to Geelong knowing nobody. Took a big risk. We'd never been so cold before. We moved down there in July, and the first place we actually went to was Dalesford, one of the coldest places in Victoria you could probably get. But I spent 15 years in Geelong doing property valuations, and I've been at PRP for roughly 10 years now. So when in Geelong, I was working full time as an assistant valuer and studying at night my postgraduate degree. So I did that for 2 years. And that was probably the hardest thing that I could ever do. So you're away from family, really relied on my wife and myself to get through that stage. we're obviously working really hard during the day and studying at night and the weekends. It was quite difficult, probably the hardest 2 years of my life. So in 2009, I completed my residential property valuer, became a qualified residential property valuer. And in 2012, I completed my certified practicing valuer. And in 2016, I completed a plant and equipment course that tied in a lot with my current family law work. Some of the things I enjoy as a property valuer is you're not tied to the desk all day. So you're out looking at properties, speaking to people, just getting to know people, and it's just great being out of office, having conversations. You see some amazing properties and some not so amazing properties, but it varies from day to day. You could be going a complete mansion on waterfront with 360-degree views one day, and a housing commission place for others. Some examples of clients that I've assisted in the last few months is just last week actually, I had a pre-purchase advice for a property in Coomera. So this client was from New South Wales and they were purchasing an investment property. It was sight unseen. I believe they did have a relative look at the property, but they were really nervous that they were just, in this current market, they were just paying too much. They weren't sure about the market and needed some advice. The conveyancer also identified a water easement that appeared from the council records, appeared to run straight under the house, a water pipe. With consultation with the council, they needed the valuation really quickly because settlements coming up, or their finance was coming up. So I was able to assist the client in where I got in contact with council, figured out that the council mapping system was incorrect. There wasn't a water pipe running directly below the house, so that relieved their stress about that situation. I was also able to confirm with that valuation that they were paying the right amount. There was a really good tenant in there that actually had improved the property, which is very rare, by the way they maintained the property, just garden maintenance, minor painting throughout the house. It was a really good tenant. He was also underpaying though, so he was paying about $480 a week, and I was able to identify that the current rental market rent for that property was $550 to $600 a week. So I was able to let the client know this as well. So that's something you think about when you're looking at property. It's got a really good tenant in place. Do you give them a bit of a discount on the current market rent, given they're really well looking after the property, or they're a long-term tenant or not? I was also able to identify some minor repairs on this property because the client hadn't seen it. There was a bit of hail damage to some of the laser light and the back pergola, which, he was really grateful for, and obviously the purchase continued and relieved a lot of stress in purchasing that sight unseen. Another valuation that I assisted for a client recently had a client, and he was working on the boats, basically the big ships that they're out to sea for 3 or 6 months a year. So he was doing his 2020, 2021 tax return, and he had an investment property in Caruana. So he purchased this property in 2012, and in 2013 it became a investment property. So he required a retrospective valuation as of 2013 for his capital gains tax. And given he was heading out on the boat earlier this week, Tuesday I believe, he had a short time frame to turn that valuation around and get his taxes done before he headed off over on the boat. Given that he no longer owned the property, I was able to complete a desktop valuation on report. We'd previously valued this property back in 2016, so I had a lot of information on it already. I was able to complete that valuation, and he was able to get his taxes done earlier this week, or before he headed over headed on the boat for work. It's just typical things that we see in valuations or questions that we regularly get would be, how do we value property? Well, if you're looking at residential property, it's quite simple. The things you would look for a property if you're purchasing or selling. So it might be location, aspect, number of bedrooms, presentation. Extra features might be outdoor areas or pools. And we compare those features to similar properties that are sold in the area, similar residential properties that are sold in the area. Property valuation is not an exact science. It's always difficult to, or can be difficult to determine exactly where the value lies. Another typical question we get is, what real estate agency do you work for? We don't work for real estate agencies. We're independent property brokers. Or do you work for a bank? No, we don't work for a bank. Once again, independent. We do contract to banks to do valuations. And some of the things, and what are some of the things you've seen in properties? Well, you see all sorts of things. Like I said before, you can be going a beautiful, spectacular property one day and a completely run-down property the next. Beautiful. So my name's Daniel Caruana, and if there's any other questions, I'd like to take them. Yes, sir.